Joe and Nick. Joe and Nick, okay.
Hey, Chris.
Okay, it's, what's that? Huh?
Over here.
Here, oh, thank you. I didn't know it.
Okay, so it's 7 PM. We're all here, at least almost all of us are here, so that's great. Okay, so there's an agenda being passed around. Whoever doesn't have one at this point. Is that? Okay, so let's go to the last preliminary matter. This is Artie Crocker, acting chair of the Large House Review Committee. And permit me to confirm, kind of go through the list of who's here, who's not here. So when I call out your name, please just say yay or nay. I can't say nay, but anyway. So Heidi Frail. Marion Cooley. Jean McKnight,
Here.
Mo Handel, Tina Burgess. Nick Legreese is
Here.
So Nick is there on remote. Bill Paulson, you're temporarily sitting out still, but you're in the audience. Paul McGovern.
Here.
Oscar Mertz.
Here.
Chris Carter.
Here.
Rob Dangle.
Here.
And Joe Matthews, you there, Joe?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, and
Yep.
okay, and staff, when I call your name, Lee Newman
Here.
and Alex Lee? Okay, great. So I'm just gonna go through the parameters as far as when we do a remote meeting such as this. So this open meeting of the Large House Review Committee is being conducted in a hybrid format. This meeting will not feature public comment for remote access to this meeting. The committee is convening by Zoom app as posted on town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating via video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and that take care of not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captioned recording. All the meeting materials were sent out by Lee Newman previous to the meeting. And any additional attachments were sent out earlier today, and so we have everyone should have everything in hand. And finally, after each vote will be taken, we'll call it via roll call, because again, some people are remote, so each vote is going to be called via roll call. So that brings us to the very beginning. So the first order in the agenda is actually, we do have to elect a permanent chair and co-chair, or vice chair, whichever way we'd like to go on this one. It'll be up to the committee to decide how they want to do that. 2 co-chairs or a chair and a vice chair. So I'm gonna open up. I would like to stay as the chair of the meeting of this group. I believe I'm committed wholeheartedly to this process, and I believe I'll do a great job. So I would like to open myself up as someone who would like to be nominated to be chair of the group. Unless anyone else has anything to say, but someone has to nominate me.
I nominate Artie Crocker.
Second that. Paul second. So there's been a nomination and a second, but we do have to have a discussion. If someone has any thoughts, please, Mary.
So it makes a tremendous amount of sense to me, Artie, that you need to be involved clearly in this.
Mhm.
But I might suggest that there's a good reason to have a co-chair as well.
Mhm.
My experience is that this is a challenging committee
Mhm.
and it takes a load to
Mhm.
do. My suggestion or nomination for a co-chair would be Mr. Handel.
Okay,
I nominate.
thoughts? Mo, you good with that?
I'm willing to do that.
Okay,
So you've nominated.
I nominate.
Second.
And so, excuse me, just for clarification, that means that you would be, you were nominated to be chair, but in fact, it would
be a
be
co-chair.
changed to
The
co-chair.
co-chair, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mo and I will work together on this. And so, and Mo's a great asset, great resource. We'll work together, we'll work well together on this. Because Mo has a lot of experience in doing this. And so I think that if Mo's willing to do it, I think that'd be a great combination.
I am willing.
Okay. Okay, so and so we've had a second. So I suppose we can vote on both these at the same time?
Why don't we, procedurally, do we want to just do one motion
Okay,
for 2 co-chairs being Artie and Mo?
okay, we can take it up that way.
Good idea.
Okay, so we'll go through the vote. Heidi,
Yes.
Miriam,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes,
Mo,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes,
Bill, you know, next time you'll be next time be able to vote. Paul McGovern,
Yes.
Oscar,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Rob.
Yeah.
Joe
Yes.
and Ed.
Yes.
Okay, now we're going to the co-chair. So we have a nomination for Mo Handle to act as co-chair. And so then we'll take a vote on that one. Heidi?
I thought
Yes.
the motion.
The motion was to have
It was for
I
both
think
of
it
you.
was for both, but either way.
Oh, I thought we were voting on them separately. Voting on them separately.
Well, I think we all thought we were voting on both.
If-
But yes, I'm
if
also
we
happy
thought
to
we were
vote.
voting on,
Nick's motion was.
if
Yeah,
everyone,
when Nick-
I thought I heard Nick say that voting them separately, but Nick,
No, I put a motion on the table to table the first two separate ones and to do one for both.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm happy. If everyone's happy with that, I'm happy with that then. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so then the next is approval of the minutes. I don't know if people have had time to look through the minutes on this one. I read through them pretty carefully. I submitted some thoughts, some minor thoughts back to Leaf, some minor edits. Is mainly what it was. Anyone have any further edits on the minutes themselves?
No.
Any thoughts?
Read
Okay,
them, they look fine to me.
okay, well, yeah. Gene, you're our
I
minute
know, I'm
czar.
always
You're our
pulling
minute
apart
czar.
Minutes.
You're the
so
minute
whoever
czar.
did this, did a good job. I guess, right?
Okay, so I need a motion to approve the minutes. Second,
Second. Oh,
okay, we're gonna vote them in, going through the same process. Here's the list of names. Okay,
Suggestion.
yeah, please do.
I'm on a committee in the NWRA advisory board.
Mhm.
And what we do on non-controversial items is add them to the agenda at the end.
Okay,
And take it a vote on all of the non-controversial items
Mhm.
as one,
okay,
but
I
depending
could-
on how much business we have.
I could be further and say. You don't actually need to make a motion that gets approved and seconded or voted in the case of minutes. As long as there's non-substantial standard changes, you just put them on file. So.
okay,
anyway.
with no changes coming on, there were no
That's fine.
changes, I heard, hey,
For the
at the
moment.
planning board, we vote on them all, but
Okay.
but at the same time.
With these
If
votes-
if officially we're legally standard and we'll pass, I'm good with that as well. So there are no changes to the meeting, so I'll put them on file as presented. That brings us to the next, one of the main item on the agenda, I suppose,
Yeah.
is really we're talking about the article for referral, the Article 44, that was referred back to the planning board for study. And so Lee has laid this out fairly succinctly, I believe. And as Needham, current definition provide adequate clarity. As far as I think we're talking about FAR, no, I think you had a good part in this. Were you thinking of the FAR? Were you thinking of FAR as far as clarity?
Well, it seems to me that the planning board's charge was fairly comprehensive, and if that's the intent,
Mhm.
that's what this committee has been appointed to do,
Mhm.
fine.
Mhm.
But I think this was tripped off by a question about how we need them to define FAR.
Mhm.
So I think that's a legitimate question.
Mhm.
And I think that should be our first order of business before we chew into all of the other issues.
Mhm.
Which are many.
Mhm.
So I would start first with how we define FAR. Do we believe as a committee that it is sufficiently clear? And if it is sufficiently clear, is it sufficiently consistent with all of the other communities who are experiencing development issues?
Well, yeah, so as far as the planning board goes, there was basically some chatter about bringing this up again before Joe brought this to town meeting. I know it was on my mind. And because it's been talking around town for a long time. So, but that being said, you are correct. We do need to address what the article has referred back. As far as some of the questions you had, I don't know if we know the answer. Is how it compares exactly to the towns around us. But I think that's one of the questions, one of the charge.
Right.
How does it compare?
Right.
I think that, I'm going from memory here, but I believe that Joe Matthews' research indicated that there is some divergence
Mhm.
between how we do this and what other people do.
Sure.
To me, speaking as one member,
Mhm.
the issue with respect to that definition is how big a volume is confined or included in the definition,
Mhm.
irrespective of how the floor area in the building is used.
Mhm.
It has to do with the bulk of the structure.
Mhm.
So how we define it is one thing, and then how big that bulk should be is a separate issue.
Yes, correct. Yeah, correct. Go ahead,
Can I
Oscar.
offer a different way of saying it?
Please
In
do.
that what we are trying to do is figure out a way to control the bulk because the FAR alone is not. So by definition of our current FAR, there are houses are bigger than the FAR would indicate. There's more square footage people are using than is being counted in the quote FAR calculation. So therefore, it really is trying to understand what it will take for us to establish control over what we think is an appropriate volume. I think what Nick said last time we were together was, we're trying to figure out how each lot should be appropriately built on for size. What's the appropriate bulk per lot size? So I think that begs a lot of questions that we need to talk about.
And I don't disagree, but I think the question is, can we come up with a definition that's clear enough that can be used as a discussion point when we come to that issue, which is how big for a particular lot should a structure be? But we at least need to agree on a clear definition. And speaking again, just myself, I don't think it matters how many feet there are from the ceiling to the floor, as much as what is the outside bulk of the building.
Yeah.
And therefore, I would hope we would come up with a definition that deals with the bulk of the building and not the detailed use of each square foot within the building.
Yeah, I'm not personally that kept on as far as what's going on inside the house, because I know we talked about this before, other people definitely please chime up, but that is, what's the bulk of the building, how high is it? What's the lot coverage, I suppose you can go in that as well, but as far as definition, I mean, we have a definition of what it is. And could you argue that it's clear? Perhaps you could argue that it's clear. I don't know if you can argue it's the one we want.
That's a different thing.
But
I agree with
there are
you.
different things, but I think we can argue it's clear. As far as what we want it to be, we don't know, I don't know, and we're not gonna know for a little while until we look at some further aspects of what it's gonna take to bring down some of the bulk, which will be palatable to us in the community. But I agree, we are probably gonna have to redefine what it means. Either that or change what the FAR value is. Go
So I
ahead.
was gonna say, Joe has a comment, and then I know I have a comment, but Joe.
Joe is his hands up? Okay, Joe?
Yeah, just so first I want to ask, because I mean, one issue we have here is there's a lot of issues to discuss. And so I think one of the hardest challenges that we have is just structuring how we will proceed. And one of the questions I have, and I think that this was suggested or mentioned earlier, are we thinking that we might be dividing into subcommittees
Hmm.
at some point?
Well, we certainly, I know I threw out working groups last week, which might have been a little premature, but I know that we have to look at this referral back to us, and we have to bring something back for May.
Sure.
I don't personally think we can have any solution to May. And I'm not trying to have a solution come May myself. I'd like to have a solution come October. That's what I'd like to do. It's more important to have a good solution versus a defined date when you have to have it, but I think it's possible. So I think it's a matter of, yes, do I think we have to have some people that want to concentrate on perhaps the referral part of it, or the FER, what's gonna count towards the FAR, we could have that. But again, there are a number of things, please chime in here, but there are a number
Sure.
of things that are gonna affect this. For example,
Yeah.
later in the meeting, Joe, we'll have, okay, what about we're looking at the height of a building at the setback. I know a number of people don't necessarily, weren't really thinking about that, and I wasn't necessarily thinking about that much as well until I saw the house again, then was talking to someone about as far as what is the height of the house at the
Sure,
setback.
yeah,
How's that
and I
affect?
think that, yeah, so that's helpful. And I think that ultimately, yeah, May is too close at this point for any bylaw. So October is a reasonable target, and I think we should try to hit that. Ultimately, everything we do is not binding or directly recommended to town meeting, right? We send it back to the planning board, so the planning board will have, is maybe a little better suited to refine. So regarding the what to count for FAR, the size of the house, then there's setbacks, open space and height. It's a little bit like a mathematical equation with multiple variables. System equation with multiple variables. If you actually don't have one fixed solution, there are many ways to do it. So I think that ultimately what we would seek to do is maybe vote on a series of, come up with a few options and then recommend them. We could vote and then recommend them, and then the planning board can choose, because there are countless ways to do this. So I don't think we have to be so concerned about getting the perfect one. We just recommend a few feasible ones.
Oscar?
I was just gonna ask Joe, and whoever was part of that last, I'm sorry, you were gonna go next, sorry. Go ahead.
So I'm not on the sheet as having provided input, although I had sent Lee a very short statement that said to me, this is sort of easy, because as I think about the work, we're trying to get to October, we're not gonna get to May, same deal. So what can be done? From my perspective, we're doing some combination of FAR and height, probably now, looking at that, I mean setbacks, but it is about the volume, as Mo says. And I think that's collective work, because the community, that's what the community is most distressed about, in my view. I think there may be a second tier of work, once you get through there, that lets you think more about, we're also hearing a lot from people about houses that are getting built up relative to their neighbors. I think that's a very complicated discussion, is what I recall from last time. I'm not sure that's gonna happen by October, but we could go a long way, I think, with settling some other things first, and then doing a second layer of the onion, looking at a couple of other issues. So I just wanted to say that's my suggestion, maybe for how we might think about it.
Well, I think it's interesting, Mary, because I know you're talking about, the height of the houses and how it's defined. Where's the datum point? Where's this being defined from? So there's been a lot of discussion going back then about this. And so perhaps, maybe, I'm not gonna say as simply as, but piggybacking on, okay, what was discussed and what people think was gonna happen versus what happened.
What has happened.
And so where's there
Because
where's there
the
adjustment needed?
Effective third floors before we started this process.
Yeah.
So something changed in this that resulted in third floors that were new.
Mhm.
Again, and that's a bigger overall box that people are looking at, so.
Well, I was just gonna say I agree with everything you just said. I think that's right. It's a collection of control mechanisms that we have to analyze and see how it's gonna affect each site, or how it works for different size sites. But the other part of this, I guess, was, do we also want to talk about, as a group, what are the possible additional review ways that this could go down? Like, I know Wellesley has their historic commission goes and takes a look at at parcels. If they're younger than a certain age, older than a certain age. And so I guess, is that something else? Is that another part of what we want to talk about? Do we want to add another layer of a review committee that looks at these and makes decisions? Or not?
Chris hasn't spoken, so I'll
Yeah,
give it to Chris,
Chris.
but I have thoughts on that.
My challenge for that is, if you're a developer, if you're an owner trying to modify your property or looking to purchase a property, you don't have clarity going into your purchase. And it makes it very tricky to try and assess in a 3-day window to point from when the open house is to when bids are seemingly due right now, for what you can do and how to factor that in.
So more layers is more.
It's okay to have
Risky.
layers if they're clear.
Yeah.
And if someone going into it knows, if you're in a historic district, to me, that's a little bit different, because naturally in historic districts, there's just more stringent qualifiers to qualify for historic.
Yeah.
But if you're in not historic areas, the typical buyer would not have any clue to think about that, unless you've got a proper real estate agent to tell you. And then if you're looking at an offer, you have no idea what you can do or what you can't do in your property then. So for me, that's a big challenge.
Mary?
I also want to say, I would advocate for getting to guidelines that are clear. Part of what I see, as somebody who frequently attends Wellesley Planning Board meetings also, there's some concern on their part about the amount of time that they're spending in large house reviews. And is that an effective use of the planning board's time? What they would observe is their planning board isn't planning because they are consumed by large house reviews. And I would worry about putting us more in that situation. And I think there's some serious planning issues that the town has ahead of them that I would hate to see us lose sight of. That's my view. So I think setting clear rules might be better.
To me, if there's a way to simplify it, say the houses within 1 block radius, you can be within 20%, 30%, whatever the number would be of the square footage for that, that'd be an easy way for an owner to do it, if you can put some sort of simple mathematical formula up front versus generic, meet on site, walk, what looks appropriate, what doesn't, because it could depend on who within your committee is there that day. And if you've got a 5-person committee, everyone can have a different viewpoint too, which is also a challenge if there's, so many views.
Paul,
I think it's important that fairly early in this process, we define how we're going to, or what the process is for coming up with a solution. There's lots of kind of suggested solutions and so I think we got to highlight the issue, but it's very important that we're not continuing with the same topic and not the same topic, obviously, but round and about. At every meeting, we have to have a clearly defined process, how we get to the end line, wherever the end line is, whatever the end line is, and what are the steps to get there, because otherwise it's just going to be a series of the same thing again and again. We need to define the process, I think, in order to increase the chances of a successful outcome.
so let's just finish one aspect of the agenda, which has to do with the referral from town meeting. Then we can, let's jump to getting in what you're talking about, and then looking at analyzing something, then where do we go from, we'll start where do we go from here? So one part, the next item, number 5, was, is there an agreement that the intent of the reporting schedule for the town meeting in May? I think it's clear. The intent is we have to report, we have to have something to report in May. We don't have to know what it is now. We're not gonna know what it is now. And in my eyes, it's simple, we're simply gonna report where we are in the process. I think that's what we're gonna report in May. And that's what's gonna boil down for myself, I think. If someone else has any other thoughts about it? Okay, Jean?
Yeah, if our charge were only to consider how attics and basements are treated, I think we would have time to look at what other towns do. And also particularly I'd seek Joe Perndick's advice on how the state building code defines livable area and heights of basements, heights of attics. And of course, we have architects on our board who understand that, and developers who've worked with it. If that were our only charge, I think we could accomplish it and come up with an article for a town meeting. But that's really not, it seems to me, that's not the way our charge was drafted. It's much broader than that. I particularly want to look back at what we did in 2017 and what effect it had, and are we satisfied with what we did? And that's going to be a time-consuming process. So I was very glad to hear Joe Matthews say that he expects we really won't be before the annual town meeting in May with any zoning changes, that we would be targeting the October special town meeting with any zoning changes that come up from the work of this committee. I think that's only realistic.
So I think it's an agreement. We're gonna have to vote for that. I think it's an agreement. We have to fulfill our obligation as far as reporting in May. And I think that reporting is gonna directly come from where we are in the process. What I'd like to do before we jump, as we're jumping on to item 6, what I'd like to do is what was sent out to everyone were some PDF files of some visuals of some houses. I would like, I don't know if anyone hey, Alex, can you bring those up, please? Before we jump on to there was a survey to get people's ideas, thoughts of what was going through their head. Before we jump onto that, I'd like to just show. Okay, so there are two different aspects, issues going on here. So in the survey, what counts towards the FAR? What land counts towards the FAR? So what we're looking at right now is 59 Yale Road. And 59 Yale Road was a house that was built. Originally, the house was around 1,600 square feet. The foundation was 1,400 square feet. This is approximate. And what happened was the developer came in and they literally took the whole lot size, But what you can't see here is that halfway back, the lot goes up a hill and back. And so the lot has a certain square footage, which allows a 7,700 square foot house, give or take. And so now if you jump on to the next slide, you'll see that's what it is now. So they literally cut into the hillside so they could build the house allowed by the square footage of the property. So that's what this is showing here. And again, roughly it's a 7,000 to 8,000 square foot house, depending on, there's a courtyard in the middle there. So it's now, it's in around houses which started out as 1,800, 2,000 square foot houses. Then the one at the corner there, I think that's a 3,500 or 4,000 square foot house. Now the one next to it is essentially double that size. The next picture is some street shots. So here you have basically the same angle before and after shots. What's going on? That's coming from the right side. The next picture, please, Alex. That's coming from the left side. Then the very last shot is a zoom in a little bit so you can see the wall. So now you can see the wall back there and the hill going up. So they were technically allowed to build a house with this FAR because that's the acreage of the property. So this is one example. Can we go to the next example, which, let me see, yeah, so then there's this example here. So then now's an example here. The acreage was somewhere around acre.
It's 3/4 of an acre. I went and looked up.
Oh,
acreage on both of them.
3/4, okay, so around 36,000 square feet, give or take.
31.
Oh, 31, okay, my apologies. Okay, so now if we jump on to the next, so this is a before shot. Now, if we jump on to the next one, so here's what the proposal would be. That line just to the left, that little squiggly line, that's some version of 100-foot setback from the stream. So there's a stream there, which means they can't build behind there anyway. But this is approaching a 10,000 square foot house. That's where it's approaching, a 10,000 square foot house. And in a neighborhood of 2,000 square foot houses, a little bit more. The house next to that has now been sold, and that developer came in with a proposal of around a 4,500 to 5,000 square foot house. So much different than this. And now, just so you know, this developer here of 80 is the same developer as 59 Yale Road. And it's gonna be the same style thing with a big box, flat roof with some type of courtyard in the middle. So the next page is a little bit of a perspective style view. It's the best I could do at the time. So again, a little bit of perspective. The one on top is the existing house. Then the next one is I'm assuming the flat roof might be around the 25-foot mark or somewhere around there. And so then the next house, now this is related to height at setback. This is the house, now this is nothing against the people that are living there, of course. This is the house on Honeywell Street. And some of us are familiar with it, some of us not. It's across from Avery Park near the intersection of Honeywell and Webster Street. So this is the house at setback. I don't know for a fact what the height is. It looks like it's approaching 35 feet, but I'm not positive about that, but it's actually quite high. So here's the house at setback, and I think I may only have one page for that one. So one page for that one, you can see, left, middle, right section. So
How large is that lot? Do you know?
I'm sorry, Miriam, I don't have that size. I don't know about
I
that.
might be able to, this was one of the properties that I had highlighted in my packet because growing up not far from here, I'm quite familiar with this street. And if you'll recall, I think this is a quite a good example of the other problems that are caused by the large house. I think that the select board will be familiar, many of you, with this tree dispute where one of the developers took out a tree on Manning Street and they had to come and ask, retroactively for permission. This Honeywell Street was the one where they did commercial and the tree warden, they basically killed a huge tree that was on the berm during the construction, or it led to its death, and the tree and the town was on the hook for removing it. So, and also I believe to the back, that's Mellon Street abutting, that neighbors were complaining about flooding during construction, or like what adverse water effects. So this is one that has let's see, I have it here. So 609 Honeywell.
It's an 8,200 square foot lot.
There, yeah, I knew it was an undersized one. But yeah. So this is like, and also this one was, I remember, because during the whole time that I was making the packet, this was on the market. So a lot of people would say, this is what the market's demanding, or people, no, this was up for sale for like 9 months, and it had the developer had to mark down the price a few times over the original asking. So don't think this was an ideal project for them, although it did eventually sell. I mean, 9 months on the market in Needham is virtually unheard of.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
And so probably because of the size of the lot, it looks like the setback is extremely small. So it's 609 again.
Do we have building plans for that? Like, do they submit any of the building plans?
Yeah, they'd be at the building, yeah, they'd be at the building department. Yeah, they'd be there. In any case, I wanted to share these with people so they could see just some of the things I've seen around town and some of the items that were on the survey, just to give people a perspective of some of the things that are being thought of and some of the things that we may want to consider that may not initially fit into what we're thinking about, but maybe they should fit into what we're thinking. Ed?
Already one comment, where we talked about whether it made sense to have a large house design review by the planning board. And I totally get how that could screw up the planning board's productivity and ownership having. But I'm thinking, after seeing those examples, for really large houses, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 square feet, maybe we need design review by the planning board for the really big stuff. What is the really big stuff? I don't know. But some of those examples are disgusting.
I think Wellesley has a limit. Oscar, do you know what that limit is in Wellesley?
3,500 square
A
feet.
trigger, so it's a fairly, so
It's at
35.
3,500 square feet, so it's small.
That's
It's
real
fairly
small.
small, that's fairly.
It's 1949, I think, it's the pre.
Well, 1949 relates to demolition.
Yes, the
delay.
demolition delay.
Okay, so that's a different issue, but the large house reviews starts at 3,500, which tells you how they're defining it. They're defining it as 2 floors. Okay, and a house. So that's what they're looking at for that square footage.
Basement and attic would be excluded from that?
Yes.
Basement and attic are not part of
Excluded,
that.
yes.
There are some, they have a thing called T-lag that includes
Yeah.
the height of the roof. So
Yeah.
somehow that
And the
does come
Yeah,
into
yeah,
it.
the
There's
total
a
of
complicated
everything, yeah.
calculation that they do.
T-lag is
But
total
basically-
livable
Total
area,
livable
Okay,
area,
and
yeah.
that's, and they calculate
The-
all
the-
the livable area
Okay.
plus a portion
Third
of
floor as
of the
well.
basement.
But yeah,
If it's above a certain percentage of exposure, then it counts.
Bill, with a question.
Bill,
I
yeah,
think
no,
it
it's
was-
okay.
I think it was on T-lag, but that it was
Bill,
also.
Bill, go ahead.
Doesn't Wellesley have multiple levels though, depending on the size of the lot?
Do they trip the T-lag after a certain, with a
Like
certain
large house
size?
review, can
Yeah.
they, you got your subjects of large house review, if you
Trip
trip
a
these
threshold.
limits at this level, but
Yes.
then once the lot goes to this, there's different areas of Wellesley. And based on the area where you live, you have a different set of guidelines.
I think you just go through a more stringent review process when you trigger a certain size.
Yes, but they're seeing lots of cases at every meeting,
Yeah.
so.
Going Mo?
Just a thought, is there a role for the ZBA
Mm,
and/or design review in this?
yeah.
The ZBA is incredibly overloaded from the last set of arguments that we were talking with, like 3-car garages. I remember the ZBA saying, no, uncle, we can't make it.
Well, luckily we have someone from the ZBA here, Nick. Nick?
I'm here.
Yeah, however, the question was, does the ZBA get involved with any of this going forward? Or are they just completely overloaded?
I don't know if it's completely overloaded, but our purpose is to review special permits and our purpose is to review
Mhm.
things that have to come in front of us. So absent seeking relief, we revert back to what's there. So, again, I was just gonna chime in, that one on Honeywell is on my walking route. So I saw that thing coming up my whole, the whole time there. And as somebody who is pro-development, I just keep going back to, and again, I'm new to this process. I'm glad to be here. I'm here to serve. And I know some of you guys are vets, but I just see us, if we can tweak FAR and tweak setbacks in the smaller lots, I mean, it's still asinine to me that we gave smaller setbacks to the smaller lots and some effort at some point in time, when the reality is that led to this massing problem on the smaller lots that are surrounded by smaller houses. So, I mean, I see that we have a ton of stuff to work on and not a lot of time, relatively speaking, since we're all volunteers. But I would come out of this thing ecstatic if we could propose to the planning board some options that they can act on making FAR a little bit more conservative and making the setbacks all paralleled on various sides lots. I don't think and you know, I appreciate the examples that you put together already, but like one of those lots, I get it. It might not look very appealing, but they could have gone even further back and built an even bigger wall, most likely. They chose not to do that probably because of cost. I mean, that's still a large piece of land. I think that's a little bit of a white elephant in the type of topography that exists there that led to them there. But, you know, a large piece of land is going to get a large house on it, even if we tweak these FARs. So we're not going to solve for every issue. It's just how can we make it a little bit better is my position.
I agree that it's a solution, it's a harder solution. I certainly agree with that. One thing that's comes up is along certain properties, along certain waterways, for example, Gary Road, there's a lot of houses still there to come down. And that particular builder said they want to go extremely large. Luckily, the one next to them was a little bit more thoughtful as far as what they're doing, what they want to leave behind, or what they're going to live in. And that may not necessarily happen with any of the other houses on that road that still are the original ones, and perhaps some other places in town as well, where there's let's call it wetlands or setbacks from the streams where you can't build there anyway, but they're going to still count them towards the massive housing they can build along the road. So I definitely appreciate how maybe it's a little bit more complicated part of the solution. I don't necessarily want to ignore it at this point. Not at least not myself. I don't want to ignore it right now because
Are those lots similar size, Artie, or is one substantially bigger than the other?
I don't know all the size lots. I don't. I'm sure they're varying. I have no doubt they're going to vary, but I think there's a chance they're all going back to the stream or over the stream, which means there's a large part of the lot which is not buildable. But they're still going to claim it for the FAR. Gene?
Could we talk about that issue for a minute? That issue of unbuildable, or the land that you're determining to be unbuildable and how
Sure.
it shouldn't be counted?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, of
because it seems to me it introduces an awful lot of process at the very beginning of taking each lot and determining and making, I mean, who would make the decision. And because there's a variety of different factors, I mean, the Conservation Commission make a decision on which portion of the area is subject to their jurisdiction. But I don't know that decision is made at the very beginning when people are thinking of buying a property, you know, and they want to know how much acreage there is. And then the other thing is things like steep slopes, you have to make a judgment about to what extent can you actually cut into that slope? Why isn't the steep slope buildable? Would we have a rule that says if the current slope is over a certain amount, then it's deemed not buildable? But it does introduce an awful lot of process. And what officer of the town would do that?
I agree that the slope aspect is I'm sorry, is a little bit more process driven. The wetlands or the stream one's a little more obvious. 100 feet, don't touch it. Don't touch it, because I was on the Conservation Committee. 100 feet from the stream, don't touch it. Technically, they have some jurisdiction at 200 feet, but 100 feet, you don't touch it, period.
Well, would the owners or the buyers engineer produce the plan that comes up with the total acreage that's buildable under the new rules that you propose? Who would do it?
So I don't think we can solve that.
Yeah, we're not gonna solve it. Yeah, we're not
Yeah.
gonna solve it.
I think
just-
you raised a
yeah.
good question.
Suggestion,
yeah.
there's a lot of process.
It's Heidi,
that's all.
I'm sorry, Heidi.
Yeah, I just, it seems to me like most of these issues that we're discussing now are secondary to our primary objective, which is controlling the size of the house.
Mhm.
So, for myself, I'd like to know that the definition of the house, that the house is gonna match the definition of the house. And so for me, that's tightening up our FAR definition to be what we think it should be, regardless of what it is currently. So I would say we would need to decide what we want FAR to apply to, rather than just maybe the 2 floors, maybe it's all of the livable area, or whatever we decide.
Mhm.
And then I would like to see us package that up as one priority, and then potentially, after making those decisions, decide if we need to increase the FAR allowances and all these other things, the setbacks and everything that comes on the lot. But I think our charge is to talk about the size of the house.
So, go ahead, Mary.
I know Chris had something too. I don't want to lose my thought. My one thing with including the basement that I worry about is somehow in the most recent years since 2017, it feels to me like there's been some definitional thing, like building new houses magically gives you dry basements. And we live in a town where basements have been wet all over town for as many years as I lived here and long before that, from what I can tell. So I would have worried about including a basement because I think we may need to have a separate discussion about basements and perking and basements and whether they're buildable or not, but at any rate, Chris.
My struggle for that is a lot of those challenges can be solved with money and engineering. Your basements, you can put a French drain, you can put extra waterproofing. If you go by Perry Park, there's a ridiculously long and tall retaining walls that somebody built out to put themselves a backyard. Steeps, like everything except for wetlands can be solved with engineering. So for me, it's hard to, if someone really loves the lot that much and wants to put the resources into it, it's hard to constrain them from that manner. I think it's really just going to the size and volume of the house.
Yeah.
Solve the FAR. There could be outliers here and there, but again, if someone really wants to be there and wants to build a retaining wall, I don't
Right,
know
I
if
think
that's
they
for
get
us to
to
say.
choose,
Yeah.
we just decide what the definition is. So I'm not personally saying that we should exempt basements, I didn't mean to give you that impression, but I just think we need to decide what our definition is and make sure that reality reflects what we choose.
And to Marianne, I think the issue is decoupling any external impact of water to what would be internal, which I agree totally, that if somebody wants to spend the money, they'll solve. They can make a 10-foot basement and put the treatment systems in and to handle it, is what happens to the neighbors.
Well, yeah, well, I agree with that, but
So
but
it's
again,
solved too, if you
then they
engineer
solve
it.
it, then it happens to the
But
neighbors.
presumably, if your FAR includes your basement, then we're making allowances so that it's far enough back, and they can, so that it doesn't impact neighbors.
I think where that somebody buys a property and expects to get that FAR, which they can only get if they finish the basement. And
What-
that creates a different set of,
If we decide that
That's
we
part
want
of
to
our
include a
discussion.
basement.
If we
right.
decide.
Yeah.
So there may be some, yeah.
Mo, then I want to jump on to the next item.
A lot of the public discomfort with scale has to do with
Oh, okay, go.
scale not reflecting the surrounding scale.
Yes,
And that to
Yep.
me is a function of FAR. And again, it comes back to how big is what appears above the land?
Mhm.
Up to 35 feet. How big is that with respect to a reasonable expectation in a neighborhood?
and which goes back to what Chris was saying earlier, and that's, a certain block
So
where
to me,
houses
it
are.
does not matter if the basement goes down 7 stories.
Mhm.
That's not the issue.
Mhm.
The issue is what is the architectural impact
Mhm.
on the surrounding neighborhood?
100% agree.
And to me,
That
a
has
function
its
of
own
how well
challenges.
we define FAR.
And that has its own
What it
challenges with that question. But Joe, I'm so sorry. No, Joe, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just quickly, I think, just for Marianne's point, I kind of, I agree with that history, but like Chris says, I mean, people are gonna do it anyways. I think that's the way the market's been with basements for many years now. So, I would, as we move forward with the definitions, I would agree to include it. And echoing Heidi and other statements, the key is the FAR and size of the house, what to include for FAR. And to Artie's main points on these examples, I think ultimately when we have the bylaw text, you're going to have the main text that talks about the FAR and the size of the house and the height and the setbacks. And then you would have some other clause that can be added in October or later that discusses these special situations, right? That discusses how you can impact land, how you can change the height of land or manipulate the land during construction. And that might even be something that extends to not outside of SRB overall, because just the way that works. So just that I don't think that all has to be done as one package, like things can be added. I think many of these changes, like the FAR and size, will be something that can stand independently of others. Yep, that's it.
Thank you, Joe. I'd like to move on to item 6. Al, could you bring up that
Which item?
the survey, the combined survey? And make it as big as possible.
Uh-oh, we're starting a bad precedent. We can't read what we.
Make it as big as possible. And we just need to see, the two left-hand columns. We don't have to see the right-hand columns.
To make it a little bit bigger, maybe, we only need to see the.
Yeah, the two left-hand columns. Yeah, two left-hand columns is enough.
Okay, we don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know a few people didn't fill out every item here, but most people did. This just gives an idea of, to some extent, that it's heading in the direction what we're thinking anyway. So if we're looking at the first section in possible issues, so the lower the number, the higher the ranking. And again, I know a few people didn't fill out every single one, so that does skew it a little bit, but most people filled out all of them. So if we look at that size volume of house, clearly 14 simply is simply a number associated with, if someone filled out 1 as their priority, that being the top priority, and if 14 people filled out 1 as a top priority, that means that's a top priority. The lowest number is the highest priority. It's as simple as that. Yeah, there could be a little better scientific method of doing it, but this gets the job done. This gets the job done. There's some time.
Some people use more ones than others.
That's fine. That's perfect. That's perfectly fine. I get it. I totally get it. But again, this goes with, similar to what we're talking about, something, anyway, we're talking a volume of the house, and we're talking, they're too tall compared to neighbors. We're talking about how does it fit in with the neighborhood, so you could argue that's similar to that. We're too close to other homes. Again, people voted differently on these items, but that's why we're 14 different people here.
So this is like golf, a low score is the
The
better.
low score is the better one.
Okay.
Low score is the higher priority. Okay, so again, too close, or a loss of smaller starter homes. 25, reduction in green space, those come up to be a tie. Or closer to the street than other homes. So you can see just that it goes down in scale. It goes down in priority or up in number here. So it gives you some idea what's going on. The one where it says doesn't fit into the neighborhood architectural. Well, that's not. I don't know if you can argue that's a volume thing or just visually, I don't like it type of thing. They're not quite the same thing. Like my style is not gonna be your style.
We're not gonna solve that.
We're not gonna solve that, and we're not gonna solve that. I'm not trying to solve that.
No,
You know-
this hasn't been distributed to us yet, right?
It's in our materials.
It's in the materials. Yeah, it's in the materials.
Got added to the packet today, though. It was just summed up, but it's in the.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I missed it.
Yeah, I mean, for example, I remember last time we were talking about remodel rules related to knockdowns. Clearly this is not sitting on a high priority right now. So I don't think there may not be any need to further talk about it anymore at all. We'll let that one go. Flooding in the neighborhoods, yards, basements, well, that's, not a high priority. But I know some people have more concerns than others. At the same time, the select board and the Needham is going through. What's it called again, Heidi, related to the stormwater bylaws? So-
Just to say, I don't think it's not a high priority, it's just that fixing something else will
Yes,
also. impact that.
Yeah, but that's kind of being looked at somewhere else. Yeah, it's important, but it's being looked at somewhere else. So there's the first section. And I know we haven't come up with what we want to solve yet. But to get an idea what's going on in people's minds as far as, okay, what are some possible solutions? I find it useful to go through these things, at least what's going through people's minds. Because earlier today, we were talking about should the planning board get involved, should not the planning board get involved? Well, that happens to be in the next section, but in any case, so with the same thing, the lower the number is the higher priority. So change what counts towards FAR. Clearly, people have that's higher in that's higher in their minds. Changing the far limit. Well, that'll be combined with how we're doing it, what we're doing it, and do we change the far limit? Do we just change what we're defining? Then, again, it's sitting right there. Look at the process for measuring height. We weren't really talking about it now, but at the same time, there was some comment about how the houses are being raised up, which is related to how the height is being measured and how that impacts the flooding. So how that impacts the flooding. And then this next one actually surprised me a little bit. The next part was, look at what part of the lot is buildable versus unbuildable. That's related to the 59 Yale Road and the 80 Gary Road one. That actually surprised me. I wasn't expecting that one to jump up the way it is here. Now, maybe once people see what I'm talking about, what was being talked about here, maybe it'll go up, maybe it would go down, maybe it would go up. I don't know, but I was a little surprised to see that one. As far as, then the setbacks, then we're basically starting to get to the middle ground now. When we're redefining what counts as FAR, that by itself may all of a sudden bring more green space or change the lot coverage. I don't know. It seems like if we're reducing the bulk of the house, by definition, we're going to have more green space. I could be wrong, but I'm not sure how you can accomplish one without accomplishing the other. So I think that may take care of that anyway.
You could build a one-story building and.
They could do
cover
that.
The whole lot.
Except for the lot coverage and setbacks, yeah. The increased infiltration, I think that's gonna be taking care of the stormwater aspects. That has a lot to do with, in a 100-year storm, there's a 100-year storm, the one inch of rain on the roof gets infiltrated back into the ground. I think it's a one inch 100-year storm. Yeah, and so currently they just infiltrate 1 inches of rain going back into the ground. I don't know if it's not working. I don't know if it'll ever work. If you keep the house the same size, I don't know if that would ever work. Because your house is still sitting in the ground, taking up the volume of the ground, and so the water's gonna go somewhere. And simply infiltrating the roof back into the ground may not solve anything, but that's what that's about. The maximum height at setback lower than district, item 23 here, that's directly related to Honeywell Street. As far as that house, I don't know if they went to the maximum height, but it looks like they went to the maximum height right at the setback. And that's a small lot. That was a small lot. It might very well be a 10-foot setback. I'm not sure what it is.
I'll just say one thing about that. I think that's a challenge to try and limit the height at the setback. Because I think you don't know which direction your roof is gonna go, where's your ridge gonna go?
Okay.
Are you gonna have a ridge? Is it gonna be flat?
Okay,
It doesn't necessarily, and you don't know the orientation of the site. I think it's potentially going down a path that doesn't really warrant going.
so for example, if someone did a flat roof, they could do a flat roof at 35 feet. But there's still technically right now, they could do a flat roof at 35 feet. The spire only counts first and second floor.
But I think the top has to be a half story. It can't be a third story. So it has to, by definition, have sloping on the side, on at least one side. No, I mean, they could do a 35-foot 2-story building, I suppose. I don't think that's very in vogue, but
That's a good
yeah.
question, whether you just do a flat roof at 35. Of course, I'm gonna argue that we should drop 35, but that's another conversation.
Yeah, well, that's please.
The more specific you get with respect to design and all of these other issues, the greater the approval process complexity becomes, and the more impossible it becomes to administer. Simplicity makes more sense, and to the extent that you can get people who are doing that development or buying property to understand what the rules are and be able to integrate them into what they want to do. Helps everybody.
I don't disagree with that at all. Keep in mind that we still want to know where we're headed to simplicity, and keeping in mind that in 2017, we said, okay, as you're going back on a solid wall, you have to have a 2-foot stagger. If you're going back and it was at 35 feet, so it's staggering. What's that? 32 feet, yeah, you need to jog it. so you don't have a massive wall facing the neighbor.
Definition of height, the vertical distance of the highest point of a structure or the roof of a building above the average grade of the ground adjoining the building or surroundings to the structure.
Yeah. So,
Pretty general.
yeah, so I don't disagree that we wanna keep it as, well, simple as possible. The definition, question is what's possible. And right now, I don't know where we're at yet, Mo. I just don't know, because I know that the 2017 guidelines had a number of things in them. Had a number, excuse me guys,
FAR
Yeah,
has to be at the end of the day.
Actually, Oscar, height is actually a different definition. It's on page 139. It's specifically, it's a much more in-depth definition for housing, for what we're talking about. We had a specific definition as it related to.
so everyone has the survey. The last part was, some of the things that we've actually talked about. Matter of fact, a lot of it that's on this list right here, a lot of it was actually talked about at the last meeting. Not all of it, of course, but a lot of it was actually talked about at the last meeting. So it was simply, let's put in a little list. Let's have people read it and see what it means. Let's put some slides, see what it's talking about a little bit more, define what that means. And then we have, as Paul was saying, we have to start heading in a certain direction. And that direction is gonna be related to May, but also related to October. So again, then the possible action items. Again, it's same thing. It's the lowest number is the highest thing. You know, where we stand, summarize the outstanding issues still from the 2017 bylaw. What that really means is what worked, and what can we make better? I think that's what that means to me. And summarize, and again, then the other towns' bylaws. Joe, you did a lot of work on that. I think we have to coalesce everything together and see where the other towns are around us. Is if they're doing something that's working, again, I know, Marianne, you said something about Wellesley, they're gonna be talking about it again to see how well it's working, if something should be changed. But if other towns around us are doing something and we're not, maybe we should be. Or if they're at a certain number, then maybe we should be at that number, and we don't know what that is yet. We just don't know, and I agree with FAR as the simplest way of approaching it. But again, I just like to not, as I phrased to Lee, I don't like any stone unturned, because I'd like to know, and I know that we're not gonna have all the answers for everything going on here before we get to some type of possible solution, a bylaw come October. But at least we have some idea what we're talking about. So when people talk to us, at least when people talk to me, I'll say, yeah, we talked about this, and here's what we were talking about, and here's why we went in this direction, versus we didn't consider it. That's why it's important. That's why some of the stuff is important to me. To at least we went through the last meeting, and my apologies for part of the last meeting, but at least we came out of something. But now we have this, and then where do we go from here? So the question is, where do we go from here? And here are some action items. Again, we have to look at 2017. What works and what didn't work from 2017. So it's as simple as complicated as that. Again, we're talking about putting maybe some type of working group together. Joe has done a lot of work. What can we call from other towns around us that we haven't summarized yet? And these are actually in order, so ignore the numbers to the left of the text there. Is the order is in the order of, let's quote the ranking of the voting. So again, analyze alternative zoning restrictions. Well, we already know we have to do that. That's why we're here. Analyze recent tear down projects. I don't know, I mean, I've done a lot of work on that related to the tree bylaw, or related to tree issues. I don't know as far as that exact line item, where we're gonna go from there, because I know what was somewhat interesting actually, was when you see it, it says prepare a fiscal impact study of previous sales history and so forth. Well, in some ways, the tear downs could be associated with that, but I'm a little surprised that that wasn't actually a higher priority.
I think it's a separate study.
Yeah, a
I don't
separate.
think it necessarily impacts what we're doing to figure out how to control the volume, but it's an important homework.
It's an
that
important
we
thing.
have to do to have the conversation.
Well, it's something that we're gonna have to know when we come up with a as we're coming up with a bylaw, we're gonna have some idea of what impact it has. Now, I know in some cases it could impact the person selling the house. In some cases, it could impact, for example, I'm sorry to bring this up. I'm not sorry, actually, on Gary Road. In some cases, the neighbors on the other side of Gary Road, when they're looking at this house that's gonna be built, this 10,000 square foot, 9,500 square foot house with this big flat roof. That's just this box sitting in this lot that they're allowed to build because the acres, 31,000 square feet. So, you know, how does it affect their property value? I mean, I know personally how I would think about it. That would it decrease my desire to be there looking at that? Yeah, it would decrease my desire. I don't know what effect it has on the property value. I don't know. For me, it would make me not want to buy that house. Does it decrease the property value? I don't know. I really don't know.
Hey, Artie,
Yes, please, Rick.
regarding tear downs, in the material that the planning board provided us, there was a lot of data up through 2017. It'd be great to get that current, you know, as a deliverable.
Lee,
It's happened in the last 7 years.
Yeah.
Lee? Is that?
Well, that's something we can look at
You're
doing.
good to
Yeah.
go with that?
Yes, we can certainly look at doing that and putting that together.
Yeah, when we did the tear downs for the Natural Resources Working Group for Climate Action Committee, we didn't look, all we did was where the tear downs, we looked at before and after shot and how many trees were taken down. That's what we looked at. So I don't have any data as far as anything related to what we need here. Gene?
It's been on my mind for a long time that what we need to do is a before and after study. A year prior to the changes in 2017 and a year after. And I don't mean the year. I think you want to take a year that has approximately the same number of tear downs because the economy affects, you know, how many you have a year. It isn't necessarily the new rules. But, you know, take a year and look at the houses. The emphasis as I recall, seemed to be on design a lot, you know, as you
Yeah, for
said, that
2017,
the
it was-
certain
it was-
number of
a lot of
feet
it wound
in
up with
this,
design.
and allowing the bay windows and
Yeah.
allowing the porches and this thing.
And set back to the garage
And-
and so forth.
Don't we want to know whether that made any difference? Whether that helped at all? Or is that's just gone? Don't worry about it.
I'm gonna say that we're gonna need to look at all the years. 1 year afterwards is not gonna cut it, because I think there's been increasing volume being built as more sophistication and how to figure out how I'm gonna calculate this and put an X size house on the lot.
So maybe
There are
comparing
bigger
them all.
houses
Yeah,
later in the 7 years than there are right after the
Exactly.
volume.
That's why I
So
said
I
the
think you have to
year
look
right
at all of
after
them
isn't
and
necessarily the right
analyze.
test.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Because
agree
what we're
with
trying to
you.
do is solve
Yeah.
for what happened yesterday.
But I was suggesting just a year that comes chronologically after, maybe 4 years after, 5 years after the new rules.
well,
And
Yeah.
pick that year according to the number of tear downs as compared with a year prior to the changes, number of tear downs, try to make them match. But but I'm not necessarily right before and right after.
okay, so I'd like to, let's jump, or actually, there actually is another item here before we. Actually, there's another item here related to number 44, although. I think it's combined with, it's gonna be combined with everything that we're talking about. Ed, why don't we jump to, I think this might be a good time to jump to your spreadsheet. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say quickly on the other towns analysis, so I collected a bunch of, bylaws from other towns just to look through them. And so I can go back and look at those and try to summarize, but I think ultimately the problem is a lot of towns have a zone that is similar to the SRB, but not all the towns have a zone that is exactly like it. So in the end, it really just has to be our solution. We can draw some inferences, for example, like in Wellesley, in a bunch of towns, they have the 5-foot, overhead ceiling to count the space, or some it's conditioned space or finished or whatnot. But overall, it's going to have to be a Needham specific solution. And also, I also do want to point out, I don't think any towns are actually doing very well on the teardown stuff. I don't know. I think when we had the conversation back in May, there were, some people said, oh, Joe showed us these bylaws from other towns and they're doing a good job. And I'm like, I didn't mean to imply that. And I would also say the Wellesley solution seems too much work. I think, like we said before, like having the whole neighborhood process and pulling in other boards, I think we do want to have something that's more as of right-ish, right? Where you just clarity and rules and let people follow them.
That certainly saves a lot of boards, a lot of time. There's no question about that. So Alex, what are we, you connecting Ed in with the Zoom?
That's right. Joe, I just want to give you a big ditto on that. Thank you for saying that.
Yes, amen.
Yeah.
The other thing is a lot of towns aren't quite like Needham in that the demand is here in Needham for the large houses. You're not
Yep.
getting that demand in
Yep.
to maximize. They're not looking for 10,000 square foot houses in some of the neighboring towns.
Well, I mean, Needham is a great town. We
No,
have
no question.
4 train stops, we have the hospital, we have
So
us.
if you were doing a comparison with towns, you need to make
Yeah.
sure they're comparable towns. That the demand, there's nobody looking for a 10,000 square foot house in some of the adjoining towns.
And I think there should be places in town where you can build a 10,000 square
Oh,
foot
yeah.
house. I just don't think they're everywhere. So
Absolutely.
Oh,
we
yeah.
need to be able to make it clear where that's possible and an option and where it's not, yeah.
Right.
You make a good point. So what other towns in your mind, seeing that you have the experience that are comparable to Needham as far as demand goes for large houses?
Well, I would have thought you're talking like the likes of Lexington's and stuff like that. I would have said Dedham is not a comparable. Dover, a neighboring town, is a rural town. It's not a comparable.
Right, so Lexington, Wellesley.
Wellesley, the lots tend to be a little bit larger, a little bit more spread out than what you're getting in the downtown Needham area. So it's one you need to be careful with on a comparable. Because again, there's not Waltham, those towns are not comparables.
Right.
Which is it
No
fair to say that
disrespect.
Needham is of all of these towns, probably has the smallest average lot size?
I would have thought, especially in the downtown, yeah.
Cause you got the sub 10,000s,
Absolutely.
the 7 to 8s,
Correct.
and then the bigger.
Mary Ann?
One thing I would also observe, I've driven around the Wellesley neighborhoods that have smaller lots. And the answer is they have greater setbacks from the street and from the sidelines than we have. So it's a different feel, even though they're building larger houses in those neighborhoods than we have in our neighborhoods with smaller lots. Just an observation.
And there's something I was just thinking about, I don't know how workable it is or something like that, but with the FAR and what's included, basements included, attics included, that you potentially have 2 FARs. That if you want to include your basement and you want to include your attic, then you're dealing with this set of FARs. If you don't want to include them, then there's a different set of
But they end
setbacks.
up with the same thing.
Well-
Ideally, they control to the same point.
Yeah, but you're not getting typically people now are looking to use their basements and are looking to, so maybe the setbacks are bigger in that scenario.
Yeah.
So you're increasing your setbacks, maybe it's a slightly taller house, but it's not going as close to the lot lines. Whereas if you're just using your first and second floor, you're not getting you're getting volume, but you're not getting third floor volume because it's not usable. Which reduces somewhat the mass of it.
So it isn't usable, so the owner couldn't refinish it later.
Well, that's, again, you'd have to set the regulations, you've gotta,
So that's definitely a mathematical
Well, it's
3-dimensional.
or there's 2 options,
Well, it's a
you're picking option A or option B.
Right.
I
We'd
do,
have to
I do wanna
read
use my
this.
basement and I wanna use my attic, so this is my FAR.
Yeah.
I don't want to use my basement or my attic, so this is my FAR.
But we're
And it's-
defining a prison, doesn't matter what happens inside. We're defining
A volume,
Yeah.
control of volume, right?
Ed, are you all set?
Yeah.
Okay, so Ed, Ed, this was, Lee sent this out from Ed. Ed worked up a spreadsheet dealing with FAR and the existing bylaws. And if there's a certain amount of square foot for looking at lot coverage. He sent it over. I tried to break it as I phrased it, Ed. I tried to break it. I couldn't. Is that any good thing? You see if it works, you try to break it first, and I couldn't break it, which means the numbers work out. They calculate out correctly. And so Ed is going to, Ed's gonna give us a go through on the spreadsheet. Maybe that can be a little larger as well.
Yeah, there wasn't enough here to help me to understand this at
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
I could
yeah.
not understand.
Yeah, it needs to be, if we can make that much larger, if you can zoom in on that one. Can you zoom in on that one? Under the view button, under the view button, the view column. We can do section.
Yeah, you're not gonna see you're gonna get to see the whole thing. Is there a way for you to maximize that screen, Alex?
Yeah, like collapse this. There must be.
Well, you can also show the top and go
Yeah,
down
I
to the
can,
bottom.
but I mean, it,
Yeah.
That's what
We have a copy here. I made your sheet on one page.
yeah. You can't maximize that spreadsheet screen? That one right
I
there,
just don't know the button.
right in the upper,
You take this?
no. What is the spreadsheet?
Oh, no, I can't, that's.
Yeah, it's a Zoom thing, that's a Zoom thing.
Go to view full screen up top.
Yeah.
Try that.
Hit full screen.
You get a view.
Oh, whoever said that.
There you go.
Okay, that's better. Okay, that's better. There we go. Okay, so, Ed, take it away.
So I, after reading a lot of the materials that was provided for us, I really came to the conclusion early on that FAR was key to this whole discussion. So I grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil and my calculator and I started, cranking numbers. And after about 20 minutes, I said, this is ridiculous. This is exactly what a spreadsheet is meant to do. So I just put together the spreadsheet to try to, it's a what if thing, right? You want to be able to manipulate stuff and see what's the effect on house size and as it relates to the requirements and all that. So very briefly, the stuff that's highlighted in yellow are things you can input. For instance, lot size, I've just got 10,000, which seems to be the kind of the typical number we throw about around there. And then I just cranked in some numbers, 1,800 square feet for a first, second, and basement first and second. And I took 900 as the third floor, just half of the second. I think that's probably a typical number if you think of everything 5 feet and up. What's exempt? I mean, I plugged in 200 for the basement for a utility room, but that's not in the bylaws. The bylaws does talk about 600 square feet exemption for a garage, so I plugged that in on the first floor.
Typically, you would not build under your garage.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So then is that floor net square foot 2,400?
Which?
Your
That-
net square foot.
On the first floor?
Your basement, you're saying is 1,800, it should be 12.
But some of it isn't
If you're
finished.
taking that for,
Yeah.
well,
No,
no, you're saying-
no.
no, you're taking out.
No,
No, you're right. It's a base, all right, so we can change that. Except that these are all coded to that number there. Hold on a second.
I think what you're basically saying is that your garage is not under your house, if you were to.
but
read this.
the house is over the garage, but the basement isn't. under the
Yeah, I
garage.
mean,
Yeah,
there's
so-
some subtleties to where.
So, you know what? Let's go through the model.
Yeah.
And you guys can play with it to your heart. So the stuff in yellow is how you input data about the house. And the lot size is one of those first numbers right above. The stuff in orange, those are the current bylaws. So down below, if you go to the bottom, the orange part, let's just look at FAR for lot is less than X. Well, the X is like the changeover value, 12,000 square feet is when the FAR values switch. So if you're below 12,000 square feet, the FAR value is 0.38. If you're above or equal to 12,000, it's 0.36. The lot coverage factor is 30% when it equals X, and it's 25% when it's greater than or equal to the 12,000 or the X. So you can actually change those values that are in orange if you want to see what happens if we change the FAR, the bylaws.
Mhm.
That's where you'd enter that. And then to see whether it passes or not, the bylaw requirements, you look at the color. So the first, under the bylaw compliance test, the first group of numbers is a lot size test. And after playing with this for a while, it's interesting. You basically, maybe you can come up with some examples, but I never found anything that failed on the lot size test. Usually, even if you have a lot that's 6,000 square feet, you'd have to have a footprint of a house that's 2,000 square feet on each floor for it to fail. So it's pretty rare to fail the lot size test, at least from what I plugged
I mean,
in.
lot coverage.
Minimum lot coverage, that's right.
Yeah.
So that green number, that tells you what the minimum lot size needs to be based on the FAR values and what you put in up above for what is the lot size. So lot size is 10,000. The minimum lot required is 6,000, so it's green, it passes. Okay? So then what about the FAR? Does it pass or fail? Well, that depends on what you're including. So if you include the first line in orange, which is the current bylaws, we're only looking at floors 1 and 2. In that case, the bylaw is for 0.38, and for this house, it's 0.3, so it passes. Green.
Do we have an example of what this house looks like?
No,
Right, I feel like that's what we really need. For
Yeah,
people to have something.
yeah, well, so I mean, I was gonna get to that later. I think what this tool needs to do, it needs to be applied to real
Yeah.
houses. Houses that maybe ideally we visit, you know, what are the dimensions? Maybe we can get that information from the building
Or
department. hopefully.
Joe has put together
Yeah.
a fair amount of examples. I'm not certain if you have all the calculations.
Well,
we'll
It's even,
need for
it's
this.
even in the stuff we got from Lee on the planning board.
Yeah.
But yeah, this isn't meant to be a standalone tool that's gonna answer our questions. It's to save you the trouble of pencil, paper, eraser, and a calculator.
It's a guide, it's a great guide.
It's just
a
plug
great
in the
guide.
numbers and you see whether it passes or fails.
Yep.
But what's interesting is, according to the current bylaws, this example, which is a gross 6,300 square feet, net 5,500 square feet, it passes on a 10,000 square foot lot. But if you included the third floor, it fails. If you include the basement, it terribly fails.
Mhm.
So that's why it really is, in my mind, the bulk of this discussion or the challenge to us is what FAR numbers make sense, and what about down in the orange? What are those values? Some things I saw that I kind of scratched my head about is for smaller lots, we're allowing a larger FAR. So in other words, by the current bylaws, for smaller lots, we have a larger FAR, which means we're gonna end up with a larger house
Relative to the lot.
relative to the lot.
Sure.
And I was thinking like, why isn't it either the same number or why isn't it the opposite? Where a smaller lot should have a smaller FAR than a bigger lot. But
There's
that's,
an
I'm just
historical-
throwing it out there.
There's an historical answer to that,
Okay.
which is when this first came up 100 years ago, it seems to me. There was concern among people in town meeting especially on smaller lots, particularly in the latter streets, about their inability to fully
Monetize.
capitalize or monetize the value of their property if we applied the same standard to the smaller lots that we did to the standard lots.
That's
You were
right.
here then, is
That's
that right?
That's right.
Okay, so that's where that comes from.
But Mo, we didn't have FAR limits until 2017.
That's true, but we had definitions about how big you could be with respect to lot coverage and setbacks.
Okay, okay.
And as I said, the goal in 2017 became, how do you put a 4-bedroom program that people want on a smaller lot? And therefore they had to reduce, right, setbacks and increase the FAR to make that happen.
Understood, but here we are.
Yeah.
And so
7 years later.
is that the
and
right
we've got a problem.
assumption to have used? Yes, so that should be.
And I keep harping on the prism, but I'm gonna keep going back to it. It doesn't matter how the space is used, it matters how it expresses itself in bulk.
Yeah.
And also in the
So if you
neighborhood.
count the garage or not, the question is, how big is the bulk of that house with respect to the neighborhood?
Yeah.
And in my neighborhood,
Sure.
there is a house that's perfectly nice house that is twice the size of any other house. And it meets all the requirements.
Joe?
Yep.
You had your hand?
So I have some, am I able to share my screen? Or would it disrupt Ed's thing?
Oh, hold on, one second, Ed. Oh, hold on, one second, Ed. What else do you want to talk about here? Before we jump out.
Yeah, no, that's really it. That's how the thing works. Yeah, I gave a unlocked and a lock screen, so if you want to use it and you screw it up, just go over the lock screen and see what the formulas were and copy them back to the unlock screen.
I think this is an incredible tool that it makes it so simple to see what's going on, what the changes. But again, as we're saying, as we're kind of culling around a little bit as far as how's it looking in the neighborhood. And
Yeah, you gotta use this
Yeah, yeah.
tool with real examples
Yeah,
to
yeah,
say,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
if you say that's horrendous.
Yeah.
Plug in the numbers and see,
According to that, it's not horrendous.
right,
Or it passes the current bylaw.
or it passes the current bylaw. Okay.
You all said it?
The, one other comment, just one final thing. I talked with Bill Paulson at the end of our meeting last time, and Bill had a comment, hopefully it's okay if I share it. He was saying, another alternative instead of which floors do we include, is you change the FAR values. You might decrease the FAR values and leave it as only floor 1 and 2, like it's currently done. The one problem I see is if you're only including floor 1 and 2 in the calculation, you can almost be sure you're gonna get a floor 3. Because that's free real estate. That's not encumbered by zoning. So,
And I think that has to do with how much we're gonna look at height,
right,
the height of the building. So because again, I don't care what they're doing inside the house. It's not my job to a very large extent,
Right.
but I do care about how it's looking in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
How it's fitting in there.
so that's it.
Okay, thank you, Ed. So Joe,
Why unshare?
yeah, I think.
I can do that.
You can do that.
Can I say one other thing about program? I think what's interesting is, and I've worked with Joe to collect 13 new building sets of plans. I think we actually have 10 so far. I have the 4 that are on Greendale and others. And I have the plans here. I would like to actually maybe take some minutes and go through and plug in actual buildings in your thing. I've got the floor plans right now. So I think the one thing that's interesting is when you look at that idealized program that was used as a model for 4 bedrooms and XXX, or whatever the program was, and you look at the plans of these houses, there's a lot of other space that you check all the boxes of what's in that list, and then you have a whole bunch of other spaces. So I think what's part of what we're looking at here is, and especially I think when you start looking at how things were done on smaller lots, there's the ability to be able to build that program, and then there's also currently the ability to build more than that program. And I think that's kind of where we are right now, that it is about what's the volume that is reasonable for this lot size. I think that's the simplest statement that I've heard so far that makes sense. We have to just figure out a way to control volume with some set of measures so that it's appropriate for the size lot.
Thank you, Oscar. Joe,
Yeah, so I give me, it's good that Oscar has floor plans. Some of these MLS listings in some of their photos would list, I'll try to zoom in here, actual floor plans of some of these new houses with the footage. So I forgot I had done this back in the spring or whatever. And so I have, to Marianne's point, it lists what the rooms are. I know this is kind of blurred, but it says living room, garage, dining room, family room, etc. And the footage. And so I just, have them all calculated. I probably have 6 or 7 examples here with the actual, this was, I think the Pinewood one, that was on the undersized lot. So it has, I can clean this up and send it over to Lee for distribution. So you guys can get a look, about what we're looking at in some of these houses. I
Hey,
think
Joe,
that,
Joe, excuse me, are you saying you have the information that you'd be able to input into Ed's spreadsheet, for example?
well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, yes, according to these floor plans. So for example, this has basement, well, these were already built. So this is basement 1369, first floor is 1523, second floor is 1340, and the third floor is 681. And you would put that together and find that it's around 5,000 square feet on a 10,454 square foot lot. I think this is just informational mostly, and I think you could see the designs, I think, that are quite interesting, because I remember from the 2017 study, there was the slide that said, what is the house we're looking for, right? 4 bedrooms, kitchen, dining room, mudroom, etc. And you can see in some of the larger houses, right, basically it's standard that all the bedrooms have basically bathrooms and walk-in closets. This is how you get to this very high square footage. And so I think it's just informational. And fortunately, I was also able to grab some houses that are probably the kind of houses that we want to have, that are maybe a little bit larger, but they're not supersized. So maybe it gives us a target to look forward to on that front. And so I'll clean this up and in the next week or so and send that to Lee.
Joe, could you take some examples and put them through that spreadsheet? And link those together with the example, or at least an address on the spreadsheet for that particular example? Send that as well along.
Sure,
as well,
yeah, I
Joe?
mean, you'll be able to find exactly from the square footage and the lot size what it
Yeah,
what it is and what the coverage is as well.
okay, thank you, Joe, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, okay, so we have a little over a half hour then for the meeting. We have to get to a point where we're walking out of here with something. Basically is what it is. We want to walk out of here with some action items. Mo, I'm gonna step up to you. What do you think? Where do you want to go from here?
I think we need to agree on what we're trying to define here. And maybe that needs more discussion. I think people are focused on how space is used in the house. And again, I don't think that approach is very useful from my perspective. It comes down to bulk to me. So I think we need to try to think about whether there's a way to decide what the bulk of on a given lot should be. And how does that relate to undersized lots?
Okay,
And yeah,
Chris.
For me, my thought is if we look at what other towns do good, problems with other past projects here, and to a point, we come up with a solution that might be reasonable from there, and then we do a lot of testing. Does this work for what we're looking to do? And that can help find all the nuances, the really deep lots that cover the, the brook, what can we try and do for that? But almost, it's such a large problem. If you start with saying, here's a potential solution, at least you have something to start to work to, and then check all of those other ancillary things that are important, but not necessarily the key component. And then you can kind of tweak what your proposed solution is to help get closer to where you want to.
Okay, well, that makes sense. I mean, I know the problem, the solution is less bulk.
Correct.
How do we get to less bulk?
The simple is just FAR. I mean, FAR's definition is essentially bulk of a building, if you look back through the terminology. And the challenge is you can change your FAR or you can change your definition. You could change both of them, but you could have the exact same solution if you did all three of those options. Good point.
If you're not careful, you build bulk that doesn't have any use, but is still expressing itself to the environment and the neighborhood. So I think we're fooling ourselves. We concentrate on the standard definitions of FAR. Because you've got space that's built, whether or not it's used. The example to me is the development on Hillside and
West Street?
West. No, not West, Honeywell. There's a condominium there. People who live in that condominium aren't allowed to use portions of their house, even though they still exist and express themselves to the surrounding homes. So we're fooling ourselves if we do this in a way that creates more space than can be used or not enough space. I think we have to find a way to measure and define what's an acceptable prism given the lot size and the setbacks we require. I don't think trying to figure out what you count per floor is going to lead us to a meaningful solution.
Well, I'm not sure that we're so much at, I don't know how many, I'm not at what we're going to count.
No, I don't know what we're going to count.
I
We're
don't think
talking
I'm
about
at
what we're
that.
going to count.
Ed?
I'm trying to digest what you're saying, Mo. Are you saying that really the critical elements are the footprint of the house and the height?
The footprint and the height,
Yeah.
basically.
That's what I'm hearing.
to me, given that you have a peaked roof in some meaningful way, so that it's not a box
I think that's
to
a good start.
35 feet.
Well, I mean, ultimately, one way or another, that's what we're talking about. No matter what, that's what we're talking about. As we drive down the road, what are we looking at?
Well, if you talk about how many square feet you count in the basement or not, that has irrelevant to
Mhm.
that. And how many, whether or not you allow use of an attic.
Mhm.
Not relevant to the person.
It's still there.
Yeah, I have concern about the height. I don't care if they're using the attic or not. I just look at height.
So the question is, how big is that box with a peaked roof?
So I mean, I think again, I think we did, I'll just say that I think the most important thing is to look at examples of what we've done and know and measure those. Because they're gonna be some X factor or
Right.
X to, you know, whatever, R to Z over the FAR actual number. And so, and it's changed, it's gotten, you know, they've probably increased the delta, or it has increased, the delta has increased over time. So then I think we know what we then have to change, and that is a combination of what's gonna count and how we're gonna measure it. And I think the other thing that's lessons learned is, and I'd like to get some real feedback from others too, who are building these things, that if we drop some height and increase some setbacks. And what's like a good footprint limit? Is it a 48 to 52? Is it 45 to, you know, how small before you start to really impact what you're trying to do with the garage and so on? But, I think ultimately it looks like 35 is very generous. I think that can be reduced and you're still gonna get plenty of room to do your 8 foot, 9 foot ground floor, 8 foot second floor, get to a 5 to 7 foot on a third floor. And you're maybe somewhere between 18 and 24 inches above ground. So your basement can be 8 or 9, whatever you wanna do. So I think it is about analyzing what we've done and what does that generate, and then figure out how we adjust the math. And it's a little bit of back and forth, I think, until we figure out that we've got the right.
Before I go
size.
to you, Mary, so certainly one thing we've talked about is where the tear downs have been over the past several years, 7 years. But also looking, well, in combination with that, what are some of the projects that have been coming along, which is directly related to that? And what are they looking like? What is the FAR in that? What
Right,
is?
that's what I mean.
Visually,
Look
what
at
does it look
pictures
like?
of stuff looks too big.
And you know, Ed, you were talking about having a tour, so walking around. This certainly, pictures are
Great.
Pictures are great.
If we can do it that way.
Pictures are great, but
We
Mary,
have to analyze what that picture
Rob
is.
had-
Oh, Rob,
You gotta know what the footprints are.
This may be a
Yeah,
minutia
so we have to
thing.
do the documents of the
what's
picture.
so
This may be a minutia thing. If we're gonna try to control it via kind of overall building footprint and height. And how we measure the height to the roof, the pitch roof, are we gonna apply a different standard from a height perspective? If it's a flat roof versus a pitch roof?
We gotta figure that out.
we gotta figure
Yeah.
that out, because
Definitely have to figure that out.
that's one of those, let's call it loophole, if you will. I'll just
Right.
leave it as a loophole.
Because the visuals of one of those flat roof houses is
Yeah.
completely different at 35 feet.
No, yeah.
than a
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
roof.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And kind of jump to that house on Honeywell Street. As a kind of an example of that visual. I mean, the house next door, they're looking at that 35, potentially 35 foot wall. Which is 8 feet, probably 8 or 10 feet from that property line, so it's right in their face, and it's going west. So their sun's gone, their sunset's gone, whatever the hell was going on there, excuse me.
So
Mary?
I could make a suggestion that says, I don't know that we need to go till 9, but. Right, for our next set of work, it would be lovely if we could say we're going to focus on lots that are less than 10,000 square feet. Finding some of those that have been done within the last 2 years.
Mhm.
All right, in a couple of different parts of town, Ladder Streets, maybe more over toward Elliott. I think both of those are areas that are sort of more going on lately. And create some examples. Let's take a look at what the footprints were. We know what the setbacks are, look at a photo of it relative to its neighbors. I think we just need to look at some real life things and talk about how that feels. And then look, then you can look at if you change something, what happens.
Are you saying that we're looking at lots less than 10,000 square feet? And we don't think about lots that are then 10,000 square feet?
At the
I think
next
you can
meeting.
come back
Okay,
at
We
the
gotta
next
start
one and look at it
Okay.
different.
okay,
set of issues,
Okay.
because I don't think they're the same.
Okay, yeah,
Okay,
Okay.
but I think
I agree
my
with that.
perception is they're felt more acutely.
Yeah.
In the
Mhm.
smaller lots.
I'd very much like to see at our next meeting, a chart showing how the FRR is calculated by other towns, towns that are as comparable as possible to our town. And see what they're doing. I think we'll get ideas that it may seem reasonable to us, or we may even end up seeing if we could talk to some people in that town, if we're particularly interested in following up to see how that's worked for them. I very much like to see
And that would be
that.
Lexington.
Lexington, I think.
Concord,
Well said,
he's
is a
got info
key
from
one.
Concord, he's got.
But even towns that
Winchester,
are,
if you-
that are like us
Yeah,
with
Is a good example.
Winchester's a good example, towns that have, huge areas that are zoned for 1 acre, if they've got a reasonable sized area that's a 10,000 or 12,000 or something
Yeah.
square foot lots, we can look at what they're doing. in that area.
Okay, so we're gonna look at comparable towns,
Comparable.
not neighboring towns, comparable towns.
They don't necessarily be neighborable.
4 right now, right? We said Lexington, Wellesley. I heard Concord, and then I heard Winchester.
Winchester was said.
Artie?
Yes, please,
Hey, Joe,
Goes there.
Yep,
Joe?
yeah.
what are
I
the-
mean,
which
yeah,
is-
I did collect a lot of this stuff in the packet. And the thing is, yeah, as you mentioned, it's not 1-to-1 because the lot size is gonna be different. And the limitations, not everyone has the exact connection to SRB. So the way that I tried to think about it was kind of thematically, like what is the principle behind FAR? And the principle is just like we have in the rest of our FAR. If someone's gonna be living in that space or habiting it, it should count. And I think this is kind of the common theme. And there are multiple ways to achieve this, but yeah, I mean, I had a little table in the report that it could be handy. But I didn't do Winchester, so that's a good one to look up. Yeah, and it's hard because there aren't that many comparable towns. Dover is rural, Newton is more dense, Wellesley is different, Dedham doesn't have the demand for it, so.
Westwood?
Wouldn't be far off, but a small portion of Westwood.
How about Norwood? I know Norwood has a very built up center
Norwood.
area,
Right,
but
there's nobody looking for.
No,
11,000
no, it is quite different, yeah,
Oh, Situate.
yeah, it's quite,
There are some out to
different.
Hingham, Hingham would be another one.
Situate and Hingham, right?
Yeah.
yeah. That's a good
Possibly,
choice. Yeah,
yeah.
Situate, yeah.
Okay,
I think this sounds like a task for some subgroup.
okay, so, do we want,
Staff.
Do we-
We'll find them, we'll find them.
do we want, Lee, do you want people to assist? Because we're talking about,
Yeah, absolutely. I'll reach out to people like Oscar and Ed and Joe, maybe to work on looking at the examples we're gonna pull that Marion's talking about.
the less than
On the-
10,000.
On the non-conforming lots, and from the staff, I can put together the tables to look at all the comparable towns.
Yeah,
And how they're
Paul
defining
seems
the
to have
FARs.
good ideas about comparables from his.
And looking at some
Yeah.
examples of houses that have been built going back in time, I don't know how many years we wanna go back example, but.
I think we hit the latest.
Last couple of years.
Last
so
couple of
that's-
years.
I think we just need a few
Because it-
examples that are basically kind of. I think
Six
showing
across
the
town or
point
something, yeah.
That
And I do
are, that are
agree.
representative.
Yeah, and I do agree, they've gotten large over time, so going back to
Too far,
2017.
wouldn't, that's.
No, I think the more
yeah.
recent
More
examples, I
recent
think
stuff.
we
This'll
can
be
find some examples.
Easier to do.
Can we look at some that were pulled off well to give us a potential metric as to what might be a good value?
So put some that were what?
I'm sorry,
Some
you
recent
said-
teardowns that they did a good job
They were
for.
not overbuilt.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
That might give us a little bit of a
Yeah,
metric. of
both,
where to
that
go.
both,
Oh, yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
we find it.
Do we have some examples of ones people,
Then you are probably.
Well, the one at
Pre-
74, the
2014.
one at 74 Gary Road, they didn't build to they definitely did not build to the FAR.
That's a great question.
They're gonna, I believe they're gonna live in the house.
I think we have to.
They're not going to the FAR.
Restrict the ones that are done well. We shouldn't be looking at the aesthetic necessarily of the home. I mean.
No.
the
Oh,
scale-
we're not.
It doesn't need to
We're not.
appeal to you
We're
personally.
not, we're
You
not
wanna
looking, we're not looking,
Necessarily
I-
live there.
yeah.
It's just that they've they've handled the dimensional as well.
Yeah.
They
overbuilt, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen some really ugly houses, but I'm not gonna tell them what to do. Some of them really are. One of them's, anyway, I won't say where, but anyway.
Nobody at this table.
No one at this table, but I'm not gonna say, it's not gonna tell them what to do. It's not my job. In 10 years, that could be the big thing in 10 years, looking like that for all I know. So right now we have three things. We're talking analyzing lots less than 10,000, comp towns, FAR, tear downs, the existing, what's going on, needed in the past 2 or 3 years for tear downs. What else are we doing before the next meeting?
I'd like to see if anybody else on the committee has this particular focus on the ugliness of two-car garages facing the street on houses. They are so ugly. I was going by a house that, I remember when we were looking to buy a house in Needham 35 years ago. A broker brought us to this house. I wouldn't even go inside. The garages were in the front.
I can tell you that it was only a year or so ago that we were looking at a 3-car garage, you know this, a 3-car garage change, and that was shot down, I think, for good reason. The 2-car, that's not going anywhere.
2-car is a basic.
2-car
But-
not
but
going anywhere.
In 2017, we did
What?
try to move the garage back away.
No,
That's what the
We
driveway
did.
Oh, hold on. Yeah, the garage was pushed back.
Push back.
Beyond that, we're not gonna tell anyone they can only have 1-car garage. That's not gonna happen.
It wasn't really.
Or how they can orient.
Well, we can
Yeah.
at least look at whether the car,
Yeah,
whether what's being built now, are the garages being set back somewhat?
It's a 5-foot
So that
difference.
you
Well,
have
yeah.
a sense of the front of the house with a
Well,
porch.
that
and
was a big,
door,
that was
you
at
know?
least a difference that came out of the 2017 bylaw change was. And one of the streets behind my street was, we have 1 or 2 houses where the garage was in front of the house, then the bylaw change came, then the garage is behind the house. And it makes all the difference in the world, whether you're going down the street where the garage is to presentations in the neighborhood, or the house is the presentation. So beyond that, we're not gonna change it. We're not gonna go beyond.
You just said it. It
But-
makes
but
all the difference in the
Exactly, and
world.
we've
Whether-
already made that change. No other,
We're
nothing
not
else
gonna
gonna
go
happen.
any farther with
nothing
that.
else is gonna happen with that one.
We've already gone.
We've already
with the
gone,
setback
we're
for
not going back
garages.
to 1-car, we're not going to 1-car garage, and the
Right.
horse and carriage is.
Well,
as
that's
well.
more of a design review issue anyway, rather than what we're charged with here, I think.
Yeah, I don't think they look at it either.
So I guess that'd be my one speech on the subject.
Garages again, but we're not there yet.
Well, some people go to one big garage door, but it's 2 cars wide. Is there anything else we should be doing before the next meeting?
Yes,
This-
we should discuss when our next.
Besides our next date for the next meeting, is there anything else? Is there anything?
Your list is actually quite meaty.
Yeah, it's
For the next meeting.
Oh, I know, I'm not disagreeing,
So-
yeah, okay,
Any question?
Ed, go ahead.
Who's doing? these
Yes.
items?
Lee is the big
Doing
kahuna
everything.
here. She will rope people in to help out as needed. If anyone wants to help out with this stuff,
Please
speak up now. Yes, speak up now and volunteer, okay? Lee, I'm sure would love the help. I know Joe's already been some help, and Joe sounds like Joe's gonna continue to be some help. If someone else wants to help with this, please speak up now.
I'd be happy to, if I got data, I'd be happy to plug it into the model and,
Okay.
you know,
Should we forward you like addresses of houses? Like, I'm gonna walk my neighborhood and find some houses that we could.
well, I'd want the data.
Joe can forward you,
I
Joe
think
can
we need to
forward you.
figure out which houses on the non-conforming lot
Yeah.
make
I've got a
sense,
really good
makes
one.
sense to do, and if you have some that you have seen that you'd like to have us look at, that would be helpful.
Okay, so-
And then, yes, we can share that data with you.
I need lot size and the different floor areas.
And speak to Joe as well, because Joe has that information that he can share with you to run it with the calculator.
Does he have pictures too? of what he's-
Yes, I think so, yes.
I think we want, I think
Pictures
the
of
focus is on the
built
non-conforming
projects.
lots.
Well, you're right, the focus is on the non-conforming lots at the same time. If Joe already has data, plug it in. If he already has data and Joe wants to do it, great. I'd say great, but yes, when's the next meeting, everyone?
Does it make sense to potentially choose a recurring time.
Yes.
Yes,
We don't have
yes,
to spend time.
Monday.
yeah, Monday is the
First Monday of
first
each month.
Monday of the month.
Fine with me.
How's the first Monday of the month? Mary Ann looks super excited about the first Monday of the
I'd
month.
love to spend time with you on the first Monday of the month.
And then I'll send out a calendar invite to everybody. Right.
I think that's what we agreed on last time, she said.
Just to some extent, maybe.
Maybe you're gonna invite us all, is that what you're saying?
I will, yep, I will. I'll do it tomorrow morning.
Much
Just-
appreciated.
And of course, May, we'll have to rethink that at some point.
I was gonna suggest that maybe we have like just a small working group on this idea of looking at the non-conforming lots.
Okay,
Just a
too.
small group of us maybe could get together to prepare this information and pull it all together.
Who wants to be in that?
So, I think you
I guess
volunteered, you volunteered.
Ed wants
you
to be,
volunteered?
Rob wants to
Okay.
be.
And you
Yeah.
volunteered,
So we
okay,
have
so
1, 2, 3, 4 people.
and we'll pull Joe's information.
Right.
Okay.
Sounds good.
For that,
Is it-
okay, and I'll be in touch with you on a date for well, we can talk about a date for a meeting on that.
But our next committee meetings, February 3rd. So that's-
February
right.
3rd.
Okay, that's almost.
Nick, are you okay with February 3rd?
Yes, I'll be in town and I can make that work.
Joe?
Well, no, yeah, I mean, I'll be calling in, so yeah, I think that's fine. Make it
Did I
work.
miss those? Alex, no one else was on Zoom, right? Just two people.
That's right.
Okay.
From the committee,
From
I
the
mean,
committee,
the
not-
commissioners
yeah.
there, but yeah.
Yeah, actually, is Joe here? Joe, the other Joe,
Rhonda?
Joe Brodak. Is Joe?
Yeah, yeah.
Joe, how's that Monday, Joe?
So like I said before, I have a prior commitment on Mondays and, you know, it's difficult for me to get away from that.
Joe-
I think that, you know, given the length of time, that this may go into, you know, I could certainly, you know, you could certainly put together a list of questions for me at the meeting and forward it to me, and I could answer it at, you know, prior to the next meeting.
Hey, Joe, do you have any feedback from what you've been hearing tonight? Because I didn't hear from you, didn't ask you. Any feedback you can tell us at this point from what you've been hearing, or the three, let's call it, action items that we're gonna be pursuing before the next meeting? Do you have any feedback for us?
Not at this point. I mean, you know, from what I see, from where I sit, without doing a study on it, you know, the FAR, the real FAR that's getting built out is 50 to 60%. You know, I don't think you can do much about the basements, but if you drop the height down, you might lose some of the attic space that's being built out, and that might solve the bulk problem. So,
Well, that in the dormers.
What do you think about a slight increase to setback? Do you see that as a deal breaker, or do you think that helps?
I think, yeah, I think the good point that was brought up was that, you know, the smaller lots are currently getting more FAR and lesser setbacks. So I think maybe that needs to flip or be brought back to the same. From where I sit, I'm trying to stay neutral on the whole process. But
Okay, thanks, Joe. So I think we have our items that we're doing. You have one, you know, set of 4 people are working on one thing. Do you need other people
No.
working on any others? Okay.
No, I think we can do the research on what other towns are doing this on top.
Okay, before we start signing off, I just want to go around. Tina, we haven't heard from you. Do you have any thoughts? Like, I noticed your first meeting. Do you have any thoughts of what are you hearing at all?
No, just taking it on.
Okay. Rob?
Good.
Oscar? All good. Chris?
All good.
Joe? Joe Matthews?
Yep, everything's good. A lot of work to do.
Nick?
No
Nick?
additional thoughts.
Okay, Heidi? Hi, Ed?
Good.
Paul? Jean?
Nothing more than what I said.
Fine.
Okay, and soon to be other person?
Thoughts. Lots of thoughts. I have some work for me to do.
Okay, okay, okay. Okay, so if there's nothing else, anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
So
Seconded?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
we have to do.
You have to do a roll call for this, okay. Okay, Heidi. Ed,
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Jean,
Aye.
Mo, Marianne, Tina, Rob,
Yes.
Oscar.
Yes.
Chris, Joe, Nick,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye, and we're adjourned. So thank you very much, everyone, appreciate it very